I'm Lori Ward. I'm CEO with Washington's National Park Fund. It's, again, really nice to have you all with us today. I love my job. I've been in the position for 11 years, and I have a great team, great staff of 7 women who work with me together we get things done. We also have an incredible board of directors, and a number of them are with us today. So we give a special shout out to you and thank you for volunteering your time. You do a lot with and for Washington's National Park Fund. We have a lot of friends, and you're the ones who make things happen with and for Washington's National Park Fund. Our vision is parks that are strong and vibrant, youthful and everlasting. And I think together, all of us, together for the parks, we are making that happen. We're governed by a 21-member board of directors, all of whom work hard, like I said, and volunteer their time. We have really strong engagement with our national parks. The 3 superintendents serve as advisors to our board of directors and very supportive of us as we are of them. At the beginning of the year, they give us their priority projects that otherwise would go unfunded. And we set out to raise the money throughout the year. This year, we're having our best year ever. I seem to say that year after year because it's true. We've raised over $2.2 million, and thanks to a lot of you for your part. I imagine that several of you who are with us today might consider Olympic National Park your favorite. A lot of people do. It's a very popular park. Gets more visitors than any park of our 3 parks. A lot of international visitors. It's got a great history and, just very diverse ecosystem. Today, we get to meet Sula Jacobs, who came to the park in August. So she's been here a short time, and she's a brave soul to rise up today and say, yes, I'm ready. Let's do this. Thank you, Sula. She has 17 years with the National Park Service. I know she does not look old enough in her rearview mirror, and we're excited to hear more about what she's doing today over at Olympic National Park. She enjoys collaborating with partners like Washington's National Park Fund, like Olympic Park Associates. She also enjoys working with communities to protect park resources. So we appreciate that. We are very fortunate to have Sula serving as one of our 3 advisors to the board. On a personal note, we're going to open it up and start in with a few slides that Sula is going to share with us. Some past positions and history with the Park Service. And Sula, take it away and have some fun with us, okay?
Thank you, Lori, and thanks everybody for joining today, the day before Thanksgiving. I really appreciate it. Like some of you, I have recently been introduced to the Avenger franchise, and they always have an origin story. And so I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of my own origin story. I am not a superhero, but I do wear a costume, so it's pretty close. So like many of you, oh, can you go back a slide, Casey? So like many of you, I have a very, very special memories at Olympic National Park. I have worked with absolutely some of the most phenomenal people you can imagine over my time in the Park Service. One of those park rangers down at Biscayne National Park, Gary Bremen, used to say, it's not just about the grandeur of the place that you're in, the park you're in, it's also sometimes about who's with you at that moment. And that's really true for me here at Olympic. So several decades ago, before I had joined the Park Service, my older brother had just graduated from grad school. And he called me up and he said, hey, do you want to go on a road trip with me? And I was like, yes, I'm in. So I flew into Portland Airport back when Portland Airport was not nearly as big and very, very easy to get in and out of. And my brother and I were going to have, a few days of adventure. Not well-planned adventure, but still adventure. And so, we get into his vehicle, and this was way before cell phones had maps and definitely before GPS in everybody's car. And so we probably had one of those old, like fold out road atlases. And we just start driving down 101. And we're driving, and it's June. And so it's pretty light because it's still June. And I'm starting to go from like hungry because I'm still on East Coast time to hangry to having a slight meltdown because we did not plan appropriately. And we're driving and driving and driving. And we saw a sign that many a weary traveler before us saw and has been happy, and it was hotel. We said, oh, great, we don't have any place to stay tonight. So we take a right down this road and are driving and pull into what is a beautiful hotel, just absolutely gorgeous. And we walk in and the check-in area is really, really crowded. And, we walk up and they said, you know what? We just had a cancellation. You have the last room in the Lake Quinault Lodge. And for those of you who have visited Olympic National Park, you know that Lake Quinault Lodge fills up, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 months in advance whenever they open up their system, especially in June. And we had just this really amazing time. We played horseshoes behind the lodge. I had my first experience with salmon on a cedar plank, which is just phenomenal. And the next day we walked across the street and we walked in the rainforest and got to see all of that unbelievable vibrancy. And then we drove up 2 hours to the north and we're driving. My brother's driving and I scream, pull over, I need a picture. And because we are on the most beautiful lake I've ever seen in my life, the backdrop is stunning. And that lake was Lake Crescent, right here, about an hour west of where I am right now, maybe 45 minutes. And I took so many pictures, including one, as Lori mentioned, potentially my mother's on this call today. And that is hanging right now in her art studio, a picture of Lake Crescent from about 20 odd years ago, because I just could not imagine a more beautiful spot. And then we drove up Hurricane Ridge and I remember thinking, gosh, this road is probably pretty hard to maintain. This is a very wiggly road on the side of a mountain. And those 2 days that my brother and I spent in Olympic National Park were huge. They were fundamental. They were before I even knew that Park Service was a possibility of a career. And I reflect back on what Ranger Gary said, and it does. Part of the reason that I have a love of Olympic National Park, and it goes so unbelievably deep, is who I got to share that time with. And I'm sure that there are so many people that are right now out there thinking of maybe their own memory in Olympic or a different national park. And it's really, really true. To kind of go a little further back, I went to school, undergrad on the East Coast, graduated with an economics and East Asian studies major, and then did private and litigation consulting. So Park Service is my second career. And I decided I really wanted to do something different. I applied to grad school and both my parents were public school teachers. They're both retired. My father said, I have a summer free. I'll drive cross country with you. And we just stopped off in every national park. We went to Badlands. We went to Mount Rushmore. We went to Yellowstone and Glacier and just every place we could go to. And when I was out west in grad school, there was a special internship. And I was lucky enough to be able to intern at the Smoky Mountains in North Carolina and Tennessee. Casey, would you mind going forward a slide? And you can see that up in the top left corner is me during my internship with my two amazing co-consultants, Yewan and Josh. This is us after a day of shocking fish in a creek to count the number of trout in that area of the Smoky Mountains. I was a business consultant, but we got to do a lot of fun stuff, including do a bear workout and just a lot of really amazing things. I was lucky enough to do my master's project in the Smokies, and I joined the Park Service pretty soon after graduating, and spent some time in and around DC. I eventually moved to the George Washington Memorial Parkway, which parallels the Potomac River right outside DC, but it's actually a consortium of 17 different sites. And the bottom middle picture is the first day I wore an NPS uniform. And I can tell you that this was first thing in the morning because of two reasons. I look relatively happy and unexhausted on July 4th in DC, which is a very busy time. And also because very soon after this photo was taken, I had a really bad allergic reaction. And the running joke for several years in the George Washington Memorial Parkway was that I was in fact allergic to wearing uniforms. I have clearly gotten over said allergy, but it's a funny day in my memory. I was fine, I promise. I also got to spend a little time at the Castillo de San Marcos, which is in northern Florida. And you can see that they even let me take part in firing a cannon there, which is a really amazing thing that they do once a day. And I had this wonderful time and was able to then move on to Biscayne National Park. Casey, would you mind going forward a slide? So this is Biscayne National Park. I like to joke about Biscayne National Park that if it was going to have a moniker, it is nobody can take a bad picture there. You could be the worst photographer, that's your picture at Biscayne National Park. It is a 95% marine park located just south of Miami. It is absolutely stunning. My first couple of days, I went out with a group and jumped in the water, which was amazing because I am deathly afraid of shark. And I jumped in the water and I came from a river area. And in rivers, when you jump in, you sink. But in the ocean, you don't. And so I had a little panic attack jumping into the ocean the first time. But I got over that and slowly, I mean, I don't know that I ever got over my shark experience. But one of the amazing things about the South Florida parks is we worked really closely with the South Florida National Parks Trust, which is now known as the Alliance. And the 4 parks in South Florida, Big Cypress, Everglades, Dry Tortugas, and Biscayne, they do a lot of the same process. And one of the main focuses of the Alliance is on sea turtles. Sea turtles nesting habitat. If you don't know, sea turtles are very, very finicky. They will turn around at almost anything. And you get a lot of debris on beaches. I think a lot of us know that, especially that have been on the coast. And so the Alliance really spent a lot of money trying to get trash off the beaches, as well as doing that scientific research on the beaches. And so one of the days, the sea turtle team was going out to look at predation. So raccoons dig up sea turtles' nests. Raccoons shouldn't be on the island. They came. And so I was out there and, hopping on and off the boat all day. And it's a really beautiful day and, not the world's worst job day, where you're in Miami doing this. And it's our last time. We're walking in to the boat and you have to kind of walk up until you're about waist level and then you swim the rest of the way to the boat. And we've just had a few successful, what we think are going to be successful nests. And we're really excited, right? And we're all walking in and I'm really just kind of in that really beautiful content phase of life where you're just smiling and happy and like, this is great. And 2 things happened simultaneously. The person on the boat yelled, "Shark," and my foot got suctioned into the sand that I was walking on. And it felt like 3 hours. I am sure it was like 30 seconds, but it was really the longest 30 seconds. And as I'm trying to get my foot free, I'm looking around like, where's the shark? And finally, I get my foot free. And I promise you, I swam way quicker than Michael Phelps. I would have totally gotten the gold in that particular race. And I get onto the boat and I'm safe. And I turned to the person who yelled shark. And I said, "Where's the shark?" And he said, "Over there, there's a few nurse sharks." Nurse sharks are like the Labrador Retriever of sharks, right? They don't really do much. They're really very, very harmless. Even I'm not afraid of nurse sharks. So it was a great day, but I think really one of the things that really came into real clarity for me when I was at Biscayne is how essential those partnerships and working towards education and resource goals really, really are. And it was just an amazing experience. Casey, if you wouldn't mind going forward. From there, I went to Cumberland Gap, which is in 3 states, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. It is in real Appalachia, about 2.5 hours south of the Smokies. It's a really interesting park. It is a historical park, so there's lots of regulations relating to historic preservation. And it is a recommended wilderness park, so we treat it like wilderness. And so it's one of the more interesting management things that I've gone through is that kind of overlay of those 2 things. And while I was there, I got there in 2015, and the park had been awarded the Kentucky's America the Beautiful Quarter, much like Olympic has, which is very cool. I'm going to start collecting a whole new set of quarters. And the park team said, Sula, we're really excited about this. And I said, I'm excited. And they said, we want to do an event. And I said, yeah, go for it, do an event. And they said, no, 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 we want to do an event. And they had all these ideas. And we, people say, think outside the box. We threw away the box. There was no box. Every idea was, at one time we were talking about just some really amazingly creative ideas. So after about year and a half of planning, we had a 3-day event at Cumberland Gap that was about living history. It was about the past 100 years of the Park Service, because it was in 2016, so we were celebrating our 100th birthday. And it was about careers in the Park Service, and it was just a massive event. So a place like Cumberland Gap gets about 850 to 900,000 visitors a year. On that 3-day weekend, we had 10,000 visitors. That is a huge number of people in the visitor center area. We also got to do what I think of as just about one of the coolest things I'll ever be involved in. We started to work with schools months ahead of time. And on the day of the actual launch, you can see that picture on the left is the day of the actual launch. And what you are seeing is some of the 2,500 school children that became junior rangers that day. We believe it was the biggest swearing in of any junior rangers ever, and we actually think that the record still holds. And it was emceed by those 2 4th graders you can see in the front. I said 0 words during the entire event. We wanted it to be for and about the kids and learning and education, and it was just absolutely special. The photo on the right is a quarter that I found about 2 months later when I was hiking, and I think somebody left it there for somebody to find. And it was an amazing event, and it really showed how different community team members can come together. It was a massive event, probably one of the biggest events in that area since the formation of the park. If you want to go to the next slide, Casey. And then I went to Delaware Water Gap, and the river is very important and special to me. This is taken about 45 minutes from my childhood home, and I've always gone on the Delaware River. It is everything to me. So I get there, and it's beautiful, and we're working on these plans. We're working on one of the most major wetland restorations ever. It's certainly in the park, but really almost anywhere, not including the Everglades. And it's just big stuff happening. And then COVID-19 hit. Delaware Water Gap is in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and kind of in the middle of New York City, Newark, and Philadelphia. And so everything shut down, right? It was March, everything shut down. But people still needed something to do. And we as a team sat down at Delaware Water Gap and said, hey, we need to offer a place for respite. People need to be outside. These are the moments that people need their outdoor space, their green time. And so we said, we're going to figure this out. And we swung open the gates, and we welcomed a huge number of people. In 2019, we had 3.4 million visitors. In 2020, we had north of 4 million visitors. And in 2021, we had close to 4.5 million. So over that short period of time, huge escalation in visitation. And what we did was we really looked at our resources and our science and our studies, but we also were adaptive about it. We said, what are the visitors really looking for? And how can we help provide this? In this time of need, how can we be part of the answer? And we really talked about it, and we figured it out, and we worked with our communities. We went to township and county meetings and talked to our concessioners and our boards, and just tried to really figure out how we can be this for millions of people who needed it. And I love Delaware Water Gap, and I was like, I'm not leaving. And then Olympic National Park job became open. And I hearkened back to 2 decades ago, the time I spent with my brother. And I said, I have to put in for this job. And so I put in for the job. And while I was waiting to see if I was going to get interviewed, I flew out to the West Coast. And my partner and I were driving around Olympic National Park. And almost 20 years later, I yelled because we were driving by Lake Crescent. And I said, oh my gosh, pull over. I need a picture. And so Casey, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. And that was the picture from my day at Lake Crescent. And I got to see elk that day. It was a really amazing day to be in the park, a lot of wildlife. And I feel so honored to be here, to be working with my team members here, to be working with partners and stakeholders such as yourself. It's just been an amazing 3.5 months. And I just can't wait to know 3.5 months from now, all the great new experiences that I'm going to keep adding on. If you wouldn't mind going one more screen. And because it's Thanksgiving and because my parents are on the East Coast and here I am in Port Angeles on the West Coast, I wanted to say thank you to all of our volunteers in the National Park Service, but of course, most particularly to my 2 favorite volunteers, I think I'm allowed to. That is my mother in the top left, kayaking down the Delaware River, and that's my father in the bottom right, painting the railing at Biscayne National Park. So I just want to really appreciate this time, appreciate you all being here. And Lori, I look forward to whatever questions you want to throw at me. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I love hearing all that. A few things. One thing I want to say, welcome to your parents, especially, and they are here, and it's really neat to see that. You know what I've always appreciated with the superintendents is that when we have our annual auction for the park, they often defer to staff or to younger rangers, and they seldom get up in front of the crowd and speak. And hearing you say that you didn't say one word, I really admire that in superintendents, and I am glad that you empowered young people that day to take the lead. I think that's really cool. And then it must have been amazing for you to have grown up 35 miles from Delaware Water Gap. Do I have that right? And then to be working there, you must have just literally been pinching yourself, Sula, often. Do I have that right?
I mean, but I've pinched myself every place I've ever had the honor to work. I didn't know Cumberland Gap before I got the job there, and it is so important to me as a place. I love it there. Certainly, I love the Delaware River. I am people say mountains or, ocean. I am a river person. I love rivers. I love flowing water. I go down to the Elwha when I'm here pretty often. That's like a little bit of my meditation place. So if you ever see me just watching the water, that's what I'm doing, everybody. It was great. It was wonderful to be able to be part of a team that did such amazing stewardship of that really special place. But I feel that way about every place I go. I love Olympic. It is an amazing thing. It's an amazing opportunity that I've been given to work for the Park Service.
Well, thank you. You arrived in the park in August, and you've already answered this a little bit, but what strikes you when you travel into the park? You mentioned the Elwha, and what else comes to mind? What is most striking to you at this time?
I think that it's just and this is one of the reasons for Olympic National Park, and certainly why the park gets recognized so often. Such a diversity. You have the coast and you have wilderness on the coast, which is just a different concept than most of us can kind of picture. And then you, of course, have the rainforests, which are stunning and unique. You have the mountains, you have glaciated areas, you have the diversity of wildlife. Right now, I am literally a stone's throw away from a city. So you do have, major urban metropolitan areas nearby. And I just think overall, the diversity, both in what people can experience here and hopefully the diversity of visitors we're able to welcome, are both things that I've just been tremendously impressed about in the last 3 months.
Sula, thank you. We've had such an opportunity over the years to work with your team, and they're remarkable in so many ways. Tell us a little bit about some of the stories that you've heard from them about the impact that our friends who are with us here today have had on the park. Tell us a few of those stories about funded projects that you've heard about from your team members. What pops into your mind, Sula?
Well, I'll just start up by saying the park team here is just beyond. this is not a WNPF, but I mean, we were looking at a septic system that didn't require us to cut down more than 2 or 3 trees. And you're just like, the ingenuity and creativity and saying like, we can do better. It's just been so unbelievably impressive. It's pretty hard not to talk about, I've had a few opportunities to work with Patty. And I mean, to talk about like the mountain goats, the fishers, we've been talking about just wildlife management overall in the park, and just all that amazing, amazing science that's happening with the owls. I mean, it's just, it literally blows me away that the science and how important that science is, because really we're fairly, as far as, I mean, we're almost 1 million acres, but we're fairly isolated. And that really allows us to do scientific research on just absolutely fundamental issues. And a significant number of those projects are directly correlated with the WNPF. I mean, I went to the nursery, and again, right? The nursery, where we're able to, when we have projects, reseed based on seeds from within the park, that we can propagate the cedars, that we can do all of that, is just, oh, there's a picture of it. It's just phenomenal to me. And I would be completely remiss if I didn't talk about education programs. One of my, I think maybe my 2nd or 3rd week on the job, I went out to Nature Bridge. And actually, I saw these 2 gentlemen, Dean and Alex, with the Rangers in the hat, doing this, I believe, exact activity. And to be there and to see youth being educated in such an amazing location in their backyard, and to think through, like, you just don't know who of those those students are going to be the future leaders or the future advocates or the future people who say, I love this place and this place is important to me. And it just, the education programs to me are just, I think it's stellar, and once again, would not be possible without a very strong, really three-way partnership, because Nature Bridge also plays a very strong role. But WNPF, it wouldn't have happened, right? I mean, it's almost fully funded out of WNPF funds.
Well, we've loved supporting all of that, and we've partnered with the Boys and Girls Club there with you in Port Angeles, in the whole peninsula, and they've been great with the adventures in your big backyard. So we love that. I also want to shout out the elk monitoring project that will be going on next summer, and Olympic Park Associates helped to make that happen. And so the point in that is, it's beautiful how so many of us work together for the good of Olympic National Park. And it's not just Boys and Girls Club and Nature Bridge and Olympic Park Associates and WNPF. It's all the people who listen in, because they are what makes this happen. So I just want to give a shout out there. Okay, now I don't have to encourage you to be joyful. You by nature are joyful, and I find that just so inspiring. Grab onto 2 moments that you've experienced, just 2 moments in the park over the last, since you've been here since August. And what comes to mind for you that were just brought pure joy to you, Sula?
Well, definitely one of them was being able to see that education. Two parents that were public school teachers for a combined 68 years, I believe. I love seeing those experiences. The youth were doing a solo walk in the woods, which is a very big deal, and it takes a lot of courage. And it's always interesting, the before and after, when somebody does a solo walk. I've been able to see it a few times, and I am always fundamentally touched by it. I happen to grow up in a very, very small rural town, so we often walk by ourselves in the woods. But for people that is not a norm, it is a really, really ground-breaking experience. And so 100% that was one of them. I think the other one is back in June when I was visiting, we were up at Hurricane Ridge, which is just phenomenal, and seeing the landscape is beautiful. And we were standing there and we saw some marmots, and it was my first time ever seeing a marmot, let alone something that is only in Olympic National Park. And it was just such a special moment because we as a community work really hard to preserve our resources, and to see something fundamental like that, to say, hey, that is important, that species is important, that place is important, this is bigger than any one of us, was really big. The team definitely had to pull me away from marmot watching. It was a really fun kind of 10 minutes for me, just watching them poke out of different holes.
Casey, keep that photo up. Is that not incredible, that shot? I am amazed by that. Not only the clouds wisping at the top, but then the layer of clouds and then the snow and it's just, that's an incredible shot. Kristen, thank you for providing that. I want to encourage everyone to if you have questions, those of you who are with us, drop them into the chat box and we'll be checking that in just a few minutes. Moving on, I want to ask you, Sula, let's see. What are you hoping to see on the docket in the near future for projects that we fund? What are you hoping to see out ahead?
Well, I have to say that there's a bunch that are coming up in the near, the elk monitoring, clearly the astronomy, the dark sky are just phenomenal, right? Those are experiences that are both educational and oh, that's such an amazing picture.
I agree.
Whoever took that picture, great job.
Yeah.
That is right. Those are really important things. In addition, I'm always interested in leaning in a little bit further on our resource management, particularly cultural resources, archaeology, anthropology, ethnography. We work very closely with our 8 affiliated tribal nations, and we are looking to only strengthen that further. And then, I don't want this to shock you, but education is a theme throughout my time. And I have to say, education to me is always worth it. It is such an amazing thing. And part of it is hard because you never know which thing that happened changes somebody's life. But it happens, and you could be part of changing. To all the educators out there, I have a lot in my family, I have a lot in my friends. Education is just so unbelievably important, and any project and almost all of our projects have that education component to it. That's always going to make me say that's important.
I bet it touches your parents hearing that, I'm sure. And I know that has been a priority for Olympic National Park for many years. It's been something we've been funding for a long time, and I think it's really neat that it's so important to you. And I can see, the connection when you were hired, because it is a priority for the parks, as is the wildlife. And so I can see where that would come in. Okay, here's the $1 million question. If we got $1 million donated us to the fund today that was earmarked for Olympic National Park, and it does happen, how would you spend that $1 million, Sula? What would you do with that money?
Well, first I would say thank you. That would definitely be number one. Well, certainly we as a park team would sit down and really think it through. Certainly other parks have had endowed positions to really help the perpetuity of something. And I think that is a really interesting way to go through things, because then we can really deep dive into project areas over longevity of time, right? Scientific studies don't happen over 1 year. They're usually 5 to 10 to 15 years, right? For goats, right? It's like 45 years. And so I really think that type of, that kind of thought would need to happen. I also, though, think that there's always an interest in, we have a lot of trails, we have a lot of backcountry and wilderness that need attention. We do have historic buildings that could also use some attention. And I think that we would look at where those two nexuses meet. Where do we maybe get some endowed positions to really do those longitudinal studies that we can't do, both in natural and cultural resources, as well as think through what assets could really make the biggest bang for our buck and really bring the best foot forward for our visitors, right? I mean, that's really who we're doing this for, us and then future generations.
I love that. And I'm proud to say that we do have an endowment, and it's at about 1.7 million. And we're working right now with Together for the Parks to grow that to 6 million. So I'm happy to hear you say that, and very thoughtful. I also want to give a shout out to some good friends of the fund, the Rainies, who years ago said to us, here's, you know, $100,000 a year for the foreseeable future for Olympic and Mount Rainier. And that's all for the trails, and Larry Lack and just the whole team there is so great to work with. So special shout out there. We have a few more minutes, and as we begin wrapping up and going on to the public questions, Sula, is there anything you'd like to share that would make this conversation more complete? Anything at this point?
No, and I was very remiss not to talk about the amazing trail work that has been happening and is going to happen. The team really, the trail team here is just phenomenal. I have never, I was able to watch the team work a little bit on things, and it's such a phenomenal team. And I know that Larry was able to spend a little time hiking with the Rainy, and it's just, those things really do mean a difference. And it's also, very honestly, is just having, I mean, this team, all of us, we work really, really hard. And for somebody to say, I appreciate what you do, really, really means a lot. And not to me, but to the team, right? I mean, you go into a visitor center and somebody says, thank you so much for what you do. I can't tell you how much that touches us as Park Service employees. Most of us, the joke is we bleed green and gray. And it really means a lot to know that what we're doing means something, because it means an awful lot to us.
I love that. The Rainies, it was about a year ago, they actually, Larry said to me, Lori, what do you think? Would they help us to fund some mules? Because mules are so essential to the trail work. And Sarah Krieshbaum reached out. We talked to the Rainies, and the Rainies were like, we're all in if that's what they need, if that helps to improve. And there was a wonderful news story on it sometime this summer. If folks are interested in learning about Olympic mules and the impact that they have on the trail crew, Google it. So there you go. I'm going to go to some questions here now, and I'm going to dive in here a little bit. Well, here's an interesting one. Speaking of education, do you have any tips for applying to Olympic National Park after graduate school? Any tips? Where to go? How to get started?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I've gotten that question many times before, but what I always tell people is it's difficult to get into federal government, National Park Service jobs. And so I always suggest applying for any job that you would be interested in doing in any location you'd be interested in doing it in. So I don't know if you had told me, when I first started 17 years ago, that I was going to go down to Miami, then up to Appalachia, that wasn't on my map. But when the job came open, I said, oh, I think I could do that. I think I could do the job, and I think I could do it well, and just kind of know that it's going to take a lot of applications. And I don't mean like 5 or 10, I mean dozens upon dozens. Highly recommend looking at seasonal work. The park works with a lot of different partnerships and hires a lot of youth through those kind of agreements. So I suggest looking at those too. So there's a few different avenues that you can take to join the Park Service. And if your end goal is, I really want to come to Olympic, just know that a lot of us started at a different place, and we kind of, eventually migrated. So be open, put your resume out there, and really look at a lot of the partnering youth organizations that the Park Service partners with.
Thank you, Sula. Sula, I'm going to ask you some questions now, and I know you've been there for just, however long, not real long. So if any of these, if you want to take a pass, and we could always get back, because I know a lot of the folks who are asking, and we can always get back to them. So you can take a pass. You can pull up a pass card. I think this one's a very thoughtful question. Can you tell us what resources are available at Olympic for individuals with mobility issues?
Yeah, it depends on what one is looking to do and where one is looking to go, what the experiences are. But if you call our visitor center, we can, a ranger would be able to walk you through that and say, oh, okay, what you're looking for is to go to the coast. And let's talk through what experience you're looking for and how you want to be able to do it. And that way we're able to, with anybody's experiences, make it unique to them. So I would highly recommend, and I would actually recommend that whenever you go visit a park, I call the visitor center and I ask questions, because you want to have the best experience for you. You want to know, is that a trail that I feel comfortable in? What does that mean? What are the wildlife? There's also, I believe the Bugler just came out, which is our park newsletter, and you would also be able to find out about accessible trails there.
Thank you, Sula. Sula, do you have much knowledge yet about the wild and scenic designation of some of the rivers within Olympic National Park? Do you want to touch on that, or where are you at with that?
I mean, very vaguely. I'm certainly familiar because the Delaware River is a scenic and recreational river, which is within the same legislation, but I don't know that I'd be able to answer any specific questions quite yet.
And if, Mark, if you want to get back to me, we can get back to you on that. So thank you for asking that question. Let's see. We go here. Hold on just a sec. Do you have any particular priorities for the park when it comes to balancing outdoor recreation with resource management?
That really is the $1 million question.
That's what I was thinking. Yes, yes.
I think that there's a few different things. First of all, I think that we need to recognize that visitation patterns don't tend to be consistent. So a popular place today may not be a popular place 10 years down, or it could be even more popular. And so I think that part of that is one of the recognitions. Certainly looking at a visitor use patterns and management is another thing. And when you do that kind of study, you do balance between resource needs as well as visitation needs. So do we make a bigger parking lot or do we not make a bigger parking lot? What are the potential ramifications of making that kind of decision? But it's certainly not a broad brush. This is a very detailed design that we're really going to, right? This is sand art. This is going to take a long time and it's going to need to change because things will change as it goes. There's full fields of study related to visitor management in land agencies.
Thank you. One more. What does your day-to-day work consist of?
I'm guessing that you know what I'm going to say is that I don't have a day-to-day. It is wildly different almost every day of the week. I definitely go out to community meetings or to meet with different entities. I've been meeting a lot with tribal nations and spending time. I have meetings internally, and they're on a range of subjects from both operational and day-to-day management and day-to-day decisions of the park, as well as long-term about things like dark sky initiatives, and how do we think through that? And so it's sort of variable from day to day, or, there's a major search and rescue that takes the focus. And so it's very inconsistent for, I love having new things to solve. And it is very, very, I never know when I get in, sometime between 6 and 8, what my day is going to look like. And when I leave at, 4 or 5 at night, I think, okay, that's what today was. That's interesting. So it's wonderful. It's varied. I assume that that's what you expected, Lori.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I expected. We have, I have one more question I want to ask you. Well, one, I'm excited to hear you talk a little bit about dark skies. And as you know, I was on the dark skies site recently, and I'm excited to see what could happen there at Olympic. And maybe, yeah, I'm just excited about that. I know we've funded some, lighting shields, and so who knows there. I am going to stop there and say to everyone, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the good questions, excellent questions today, folks. Here you can see our priority areas that were given to us by the parks years ago. That's the areas that we're funding today. Like I said early on, we've raised 2.2 million this year for the parks, those 4 areas. And again, it's thanks to all of you. You know, we couldn't do this without you. So keep the support coming. Be in touch with us with any questions, anytime. That's what we're here for. And Sula, you were remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you for everybody for attending. It's been a joy.
Yeah. All right, everyone, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful weekend, relaxing and celebrating those that you choose to spend the time with. Just have a lovely, lovely time. Sula, thank you. Take good care.